We are stoked.
I'm a terrible sore loser. I don't follow the rules.
All the bearded guys seem to lie. Yeah.
There are rumors galore.
I am so up and down in my emotions right now.
Retain salary.
Okay. Where there is smoke, there is always fire, etc., etc., etc.
You don't do it.
Been there, done that.
And we'll get into it later.
They know crap about hockey.
Come on. Well, I laugh it off.
I have no issue.
Here's the thing, though. I have nothing.
I'm okay with this deal.
There was no other option.
So now you have nothing.
We already blew it.
Win now, win now.
It paid off.
I will eat my pants.
Hey guys, it's Two Guys in Hockey Talk. I'm Pavel the Cat and my colleague.
It's Reverend Evan Renners at your service. I am Jack for today. Today's episode 23, season 3 at Two Guys in Hockey Talk is going to be, as the famous Ed Whalen used to say in Stampede Wrestling, it's going to be a ring of ding-dong dandy.
No, nobody gets your references. Stop making up things that like old timers know, right? Patrick is sophisticated and he knows the latest lingo, which is our guest for tonight. So before we get into it, welcome Patrick to the show. We're happy to have you. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. Happy to be back. Good to see you guys again.
Oh, sorry.
We ready? We ready here? Before we get going, come on, man. We got to get our cheers in.
I was getting there. I just wanted to say, Patrick, you're looking sharp, but you should really tell my colleague to get a beard because clearly he does not look good at all. And clearly he wanted to be so involved in the game that he got to ice level with his background. So I love it. I love it a lot.
It's a good background. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Right. All I'm going to say, and this is going to be just a little teaser where we're going to go to start. This is what the arenas are going to look like in another country outside of North America.
Oh, I thought you were just at the new Arizona rink.
No, can't you? We can fit more than 10 people in this arena.
But we have a big, serious show tonight. There's a lot going on in the world, so we're going to acknowledge it. Before we get started on that, we want you to like, subscribe, follow us. We love hearing from you guys. And we also want to preface this that this is not a political podcast. We have our friend and colleague, Aaron Singleton, who does that. But we're not international geopolitical analysts. We like to think we are, but we're really not. But Patrick does have some insight. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the current invasion that's happening with Russia and Ukraine, that conflict, has affected a lot of parts of hockey around the world, including the NHL as well as the KHL. So Patrick, why don't you kind of give us the background of what's been going on and what you're kind of hearing is happening surrounding both the KHL and NHL?
Well, I think the situation caught a lot of people in the KHL by surprise. They didn't see it coming. Of course, people in North America, there had been rumors, but again, it was a surprise. So this last week has seen a big scramble, kind of by hockey groups around the world, the IIHF, the NHL, and other various leagues, to sort of respond to it. Kind of, what are we going to do now? How do we deal with that? And we start with the IIHF. Of course, the IIHF met earlier this week. Their decision was to remove all of the national teams of Russia and Belarus from World Championship competition, as well as any clubs that were participating in team competitions like the Champions League and things like that. So they're out. So that's for the national teams. That's U18, the U20, the World Juniors team, the men's senior team, women's U18, and women's senior. So they're all out of the World Championship for now. The IIHF also decided to remove from Russia the hosting rights to the 2023 World Juniors, which were scheduled to be held in Omsk and Novosibirsk. Interestingly, the IIHF has not yet removed the hosting rights for the men's senior world championship from St. Petersburg. That was 2023, the 2023 tournament.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They said, we're going to make a decision on that later. And actually, Luc Tardif, the president of the IIHF, new president of the IIHF, said he has some optimism that the tournament will go ahead in Russia as scheduled. So I myself don't know what to make of that particularly. I think perhaps a little bit of maybe some diplomacy going on there, kind of, leaving the porch light on,
So here's a question, Patrick. Why do you think, because the world, now correct me if I'm wrong, is that not in May?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's in May and the World Juniors is going to be held in Canada in August, but they're not going to allow the national team to play,
Right.
why would they allow the national team, not to mention being in Russia? I mean, that.
Well, May of 2023. This is next year's.
Yeah, next year.
Okay, so what's going to happen right now coming up? They're not going to be playing for this year then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it looks like what we can say for certain is 2022. The Russian national teams are and Belarusian national teams are done.
Yeah.
They are finished.
Could you explain to everyone, because we have heard some people saying they're kind of confused. They're hearing Belarus. Not everyone knows much about what's happening with Belarus. Maybe update us why Belarus would be included. We understand Russia's invasion. What's happening on the Belarus front that's taken them out?
Well, Belarus closely allied with Russia, and a number of the Russian military units that had invaded Ukraine invaded from Belarus. They were stationed in Belarus. They were doing military exercises in Belarus, and they used that as their launch point for the invasion. Belarus bordering Ukraine more or less to the north, on the north border. So that's why Belarus is included in this. As Belarus very, very closely allied with Russia.
Yeah.
So they're
That's fair. Now,
long and complicated story short there, but that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
Nope, 100%. Now there were some rumblings at the end of the recent World Juniors tournament out here in Edmonton and Red Deer when the Russian team was flying out. I guess they had some conflict with one of the airlines because they were getting some shenanigans, as young men do. Pay no heed to any of that. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is kind of Luc Tardif, because he's come into this role only recently. I think he's only 6 or 7 months on the role as the new president. So he's very fresh, and he's already had to navigate through almost 2, if not 3 major crises, with the COVID tournament being first delayed, then being without fans, then, everything else. And now he's got this, which again, no fault of his own, and he's trying to manage. How do you find that he's been faring and managing and navigating through this, especially since, as you know, and you've talked about it in our previous episodes, a lot of these young guys, this is their only time to perform because they're trying to go professional, whatever level that may be, whether it's the NHL, AHL, KHL, one of the Swiss leagues, Sweden, Finland, etc. What are your thoughts on his response to this role?
As you say, these have been crises that have come upon him through no fault of his own. I think he's handled it as well as he could, which may not be the same thing as saying he's handled it well, if that makes sense. There may have been some of these situations where there was just no right answer, and I gather it is a very, very complicated thing to set up a major international tournament, or even a not major international tournament, and. I see people, and I get it, saying, why didn't they have a plan B for a canceled tournament? Why wasn't there some contingency plan ready? And that involves basically organizing 2 tournaments instead of just one. And so he took some flack for the cancellation of the women's U18 Worlds in January. It's scheduled to be in Sweden, and a lot of people said, I think very reasonably enough, why did the World Juniors go ahead? And then they just kind of canceled the women's U18s. Well, again, it was a lot of it had to do with money because
Yep.
World Juniors makes a lot of money for the IIHF, which is used to pay for other tournaments, which is used to pay for the ones that aren't huge revenue generators. Um, and there simply wasn't time to move the women's U18s somewhere else, and get them going right away. Now it appears they will be played this summer at some point, probably in the U.S. So at least the top division will be played in the U.S. and the two lower division women's U18s that were canceled will take place this summer in their previous intended hosts, and I can't remember exactly where those were right offhand. But that's good news. So they were able to. It looks like, cross fingers, that they were able to get those.
Yeah, there was a
Tournaments
lot of
going
heat
again.
about that cancellation of the U20 for the women and not worrying about for the guys. And I know a lot of different people. Everyone has their own take. No one truly knows behind it, the political move. Some people felt that they ended it just a tad bit early,
Mhm.
more so just because of the fact that they thought they can't go through this still, and the fact that they were saying it's so dangerous they couldn't even have the women. Because a lot of key women in hockey have actually stepped up and they just said this is ridiculous, right? And that's their big bread and butter, their big bread and butter that they made. So good on them. I just like to put I'm going to put a plug in talking about women's hockey. So we just made arrangements. It looks like next week we will have Cassidy Sauvé, goalie's played in the PWHA. She will be on. So we're going to get to ask some goalie questions from some goalie gurus that are actually playing out there. Cassidy Sauvé. She's playing in Finland right now, pro hockey. So she's telling us, so we're going to do a pre-podcast with her and set it up for next week. So I'm interested. We're going to continue this conversation because I'm wondering, is this affecting any hockey with everything that's going on over there in Europe right now too, right?
Well,
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Patrick.
as I say, you mentioned Finland. Of course, one of the big early bits of fallout for the KHL was the withdrawal of Jokerit Helsinki from the playoffs. And again, to be absolutely precise, Jokerit have not withdrawn yet from the KHL. They have, at least I don't believe they have. They have
They
withdrawn
just
from
pulled
the
out of the
playoffs.
playoffs. That was all that
Yeah,
they said. Okay.
yeah, and which meant um, KHL had to make a decision, and so Spartak Moscow are through to the second round. They said we'll just give them a forfeit win and deal with it later. Um, the team that has withdrawn from the KHL, that has left the KHL completely, is Dinamo Riga, and their team from the Latvian capital. They announced that they have left the KHL. Um, Very hard to see under the current circumstances that they would ever be back.
Wow.
Latvia being a NATO country and relations with Russia being obviously what they are right now, that's probably the end of that project.
Wow.
Yeah, no word on what Dinamo will do now, whether they'll join the Latvian league, whether they could conceivably ask to join the Finnish league or one of the other Scandinavian leagues. They're probably good enough to take part in those leagues, at least currently. But for now, they're out of the KHL, and hard to see them coming back, and Jokerit too. I mean, they may simply be waiting for later to make an official decision about leaving the league.
Do you know, there's been so much discussion. Pavel, we've talked about some of this with, like, even, could you start a WNHL for Women's and National Hockey League? And just because of the money that's behind that, right? And I know there's been talk about the best on best of the world and all this stuff, because the KHL really is considered the second best league in the world. But with this happening, there's going to be some outcomes from this that people aren't going to like. It's going to change the whole hockey world. You really wonder, could there be potential out of this, though, where we get an NHL Europe? Could there be,
Well,
if money could get behind, someone could get money behind this?
yeah, and make a pan-European league. It's been talked about, and there have been some attempts in the past at it. At least at a sort of pan-European tournament. Right now, there is the Champions League, um, which was they just had their final yesterday, and I've completely forgotten. I saw who won it. I've completely forgotten. But anyway, that's going on. That's been around a few seasons now, and is, I think, maybe getting its feet on the ground a little bit and getting kind of established.
Could you explain to us maybe for people? I know in soccer it's more people that are in soccer and understand how the Champions League is working for hockey. Like maybe
It's
people that are
it
just
is
familiar
the
with North America.
Yeah, it's the champions of a number of the domestic European leagues. The Swedish league and the Finnish league and so on and so forth. And they play a group system to begin with, like a preliminary round in groups of, I think, 4, and then the group winners advance to a knockout, sort of a knockout tournament. I believe that is how it works. So it's actually not that dissimilar from the Champions League in soccer or football, and yeah, it's basically a modeled on that, but involving the champion teams from across Europe. And now, and one of the things there, of course, the KHL has never taken part in it.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're, and I don't know precisely why, except that maybe I believe that the decision came from the KHL side, that they weren't interested in taking part, so costs too high maybe, or revenue not enough, or
You always wonder too, though, if you want to be the big league, it'd be like, would the NHL consider to be a part of, like, do you know what I mean?
yeah, well, that's true too. Yep.
Yeah,
Maybe some of that going on.
like what if a KHL team goes in and loses, right?
Well,
Will that
exactly.
make the
Yeah,
KHL?
there's no nothing particularly for them to gain and a lot to lose, as you say. The champions of Belarus were taking part in the Champions League, but have been expelled from that. So they're not involved in that right now. So, but they have been, and yeah. So that's the Champions League, and it's quite a sizable number of countries that take part in it.
Wow.
And,
I think a lot more countries are realizing that the value of not just any sports, but the value of hockey and what it brings to a lot of communities, and how you've seen it grow in places that normally you would consider it being as big as it is. Now, the one other thing that we kind of wanted to allude to is, I know that there's been some fallout of players leaving who are previously in the NHL or AHL or one of the leagues, and then they transitioned over to KHL for whatever reason, and now their earnings are a little bit being cut in half with everything with the sanctions that are taking place. But I wanted to shift our attention a little bit more to the NHL, because there's a prominence been shed with the light for NHL players such as Alexander Ovechkin, more notably Evgeny Malkin, and we don't have to get into the merits of what they said, but I think, talk to us a kind of the difficult dynamic and conflict of Russian players who are in Russia and, represent their country and love representing their country, or would play for them or have played for them, and yet they're finding this imbalance where people are looking for heads to roll, as one would say, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
well, I was interested to note that the NHL said it had stepped up security for its Russian and Belarusian players. I thought, yeah, probably they would do that. The NHL has long prided itself on being a business, and unless sort of tremendous pressure is brought to bear on them, I can't see them doing anything like expelling Russian players or banning Russian players from the league. There's simply, simply too much revenue from guys like Ovechkin and Malkin and those guys. So that money talks, and in the NHL's case, quite loudly. And so they won't do anything like that until and unless they absolutely have to. Despite some calls, there have been some calls for them to do that, for NHL teams to cancel the contracts of their Russian players. Dominik Hasek, who's now head of the Czech Hockey Federation, put out a call for that earlier this week. It's interesting. You go back and look at the history of Russian players in the NHL, which is actually not that long. It's about 30 years, a little over 30 years that there's been a serious Russian presence in the NHL. And of course, when they first arrived, there was some very mixed feelings about them being there. I think about Don Cherry, and guys like that, and their reaction about guys coming over, taking jobs and doing all that, and some resentment of them then. And then I think that faded over time. Guys got to see people like the Russian Five in Detroit, and Pavel Bure, and all of those players who
KLM line, right?
Yep, and Mogilny and guys like that, and then they kind of handed it off to the next generation, which was Kovalchuk and Ovechkin and Malkin, and now we've got Kaprizov and Tarasenko, and so that feeling kind of faded. The question is going to be whether it comes back now with this invasion and the very massive increase in tensions. I mean, relations have been rocky since 2014, but all of a sudden, it's gone up off the charts. So how are NHL fans going to respond? How are NHL teams going to respond? That's
it's
we wait to see.
Yeah, and I think here we can all agree that no amount of harassment, xenophobia, attacks is going to help anybody. It's not going to better the situation, and It's not going to resolve itself whether Alexander Ovechkin and all these other current Russian players, whether it's Kaprizov, Kucherov, some of the ones you've mentioned, play or don't play. It doesn't necessarily do that, and certainly there's a different mentality and insight to being Eastern European and being Russian, and what that means to come from there, and that culture and history, which rarely you can remove, right? People can, say all they want and think that it's easy, but there's more going on behind the scenes.
Yep.
Now, I know that their companies are going to take whatever steps they need to believing what they represent and their values. And of course, I'm sure Ovechkin is going to be fine whether he isn't paid or not. He's been paid very well, his recent contract. So I think that's kind of what we want to get at. And it's a difficult balance between managing those international conflicts with politics in mind versus the game on the ice, which is a completely separate entity, right? Yep. And there's a difference between even representing your country and nation versus representing what that current leader or leaders in place determine should be the course of action. And that's kind of where we just want to set that aside so that people don't think we're taking one side or the other, because we've heard mixed, from both sides, different mixed feelings. But.
Yeah, exactly. And,
so, hey, I was going to throw in an interesting fact for you guys. So I always like to throw fun facts. So the first Russian that was drafted was Fedosov, Vladislav Fedosov, because he was formerly with the Soviet Union, later with Russia. So guys, get ready for this. In 1978, he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. And then, of course, later, that was 201st overall. Then later, of course, he goes back into the draft because he never comes to play. Then he was drafted by the New Jersey Devils 145th overall in 1983. Interesting. fun fact about a Russian player.
Yep. Yeah, and speaking of drafts, there was a sort of development today in this situation involving the Canadian Hockey League, the three major junior leagues in Canada, and they have some American teams as well. Um, they had a meeting on the situation and have decided to cancel the Canada-Russia uh, Super Series. You know, that takes place every fall in October, November.
And it just
Um,
got canceled today then.
yes, yeah,
Okay,
that's
wow.
canceled for this year. Not going to happen. But they didn't, and it had been rumored that they were going to ban players from Russia and Belarus from their import draft, but they
Yeah.
didn't do that. They kind of hedged a little bit, said that they had not determined the format yet of the draft, and the decision will be made later. But they didn't do that, didn't take that step today.
Well, and that's interesting, you know. So let's take a moment and talk about that for like these young players. Not talking. Well, I mean, it's even professional. The big piece, you know, I mean, it's crazy out there, especially on social media, especially on Twitter. Twitter wars, there's a reason for that. I was very privileged. I was one of the guys this past week. Damian Cox blocked me because he didn't like my comments that I made. I didn't think I was that bad, but you know what? It's Twitter. It's just a bunch of fun, us talking passionate about hockey. But one of the things that needs to be brought out, I think, is that the banning is on the national teams against Russia. They're not trying to
Correct.
penalize the actual players themselves,
Yeah.
even though there is a byproduct. So I could see why they never did that, at least yet.
Hmm.
But I know there's transfer fees when they come over out of their clubs and stuff. But here's something interesting. We talk about a generational player, not this draft, but next draft for Medvedev Nishkov. Yeah, I mean, he stayed back in Russia. I'm really worried how this could affect him coming over if something happens. What do you think is? Do you think that it's gonna just sweep over, or what do you think is going to happen? Could we end up where Russian players can't get out of there?
Well, it could go either way. It could end up with a situation like when the Soviet Union existed. You know, and Soviet hockey was very strong, and it was all but impossible until the last couple of years of the Cold War to get players from Russia or from the Soviet Union in general to come over. Um, Not even, I don't think they even had any defections until about 1989. Like players defected from Czechoslovakia
Yeah.
for certain. Stasny's,
Well,
from
who was it? Wasn't it Ned? No, well, Nedved was a common one. Wasn't it McGillney? Was the probably the
McGillney, the first
McGillney
defector.
defected. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But that was '89, I think, and so that
yeah,
was
yeah.
that was very late on. So we could end up with that. We could end up with that again, where Russian players play in Russia. And I was thinking, reading about the CHL, seeing the rumors that they were going to ban Russian players from the entry draft. I was thinking, yeah, that would be a gift to the Russian Hockey Federation. That would be, because they've been trying to get legislation through the State Duma, and did get legislation through the State Duma, um, requiring under 23 players in any sport who leave Russia to play to compensate their Russian teams. Um, and as it was in any sport, but that was particularly directed at hockey, because that is where the major talent drain is in
Wow.
Russian sport.
Yeah.
It's in hockey. Um,
Okay.
so that's one possibility, that it becomes very, very difficult to get players out of Russia again. Um, Other possibility is that it goes the other way, and we end up with a situation like they had in the '90s, when the Russian economy was in shambles, and the situation was very, very bad in the country, and literally hundreds of players left and came overseas. So, I mean, events will illustrate here which way we go. I'm sure it's something that NHL teams are thinking about, something that the junior leagues are thinking about, and what will they do if there's an exodus from Russia like that again? Alternatively, what'll they do if the wall goes up? You know, if the that pipeline is shut down. So, a guy like Michkov, you know, he's been a lot of talk, you know, whether him or Connor Bedard would go first overall. I would think right now it would be a very, very gutsy NHL team that would take Matvei Michkov first overall. You know, without some real guarantees that they could get him overseas.
So, do you know, is there been a junior team that has in the import drafted Mishkov if he chose to come over this next season for 1 year?
That is an excellent question.
So while you're doing that, let me go to my colleague here while you're looking that up. So Pavel, let's go around these Russian players. You were just mentioning about, you know, again, this is not a political podcast. We'll leave that for our buddy Aaron. He can work around that. He's much better, much more skilled at having those conversations, guys. We just stir up controversy. So, hey, what's your thoughts around the media right now? Asking people like they're going to Russian players and they're trying to get them to say how they feel about it. It's almost like they want them to denounce Putin and all this stuff. And I'm actually really worried about these players. And I feel like the media have a bigger responsibility. And I don't know if they're doing the right job, or is that just my take?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's a balance. I understand you got to chase a story if there's a story. There are valuable insights and words that have meaning from elite players who showcase the game. So an Ovechkin, people listen to. You know, when he indicated, you know, a few years back, when the Olympics were still being discussed this year in Beijing, that just took place, about he would even defect and get suspended to go and represent his country. That meant a lot for him because of the fact that he could do that. You know, like very few players can speak up at that level because he is a veteran. He has done a lot in the game. And I think the media needs to subdue its expectations because there's more of the story than what it is to NHL athletes. That being said, I do understand the fair criticism of, you know, when when Ovechkin supported Putin, you know, and he has that close relationship and tie with him. And he did talk, you know, and it's been speculated that he will go back to the KHL after he retires from the NHL and still play maybe a year or two just to, you know, because he loves his country. And that's perfectly understandable. And it's tough, but, you know, he had to say he's my president, but he endorsed him. And sometimes when you endorse something, you have to defend that endorsement. Why would you endorse that situation? So again, it's a balance. You know, I think the quote we got from Ovechkin is perfectly adequate. I think he didn't even have to say anything. You know, he could have opted out and said, I just want to focus on hockey. This is all I want to do. You know, we had a similar situation here in Edmonton with the Evander Kane situation and how some of the players commented, like Connor McDavid, and people made a big deal about that because they're looking for the story. And I think we need to understand that some people are thinking emotionally about this, and our hearts are with the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian nation, because that is a heavy place to be right now, to be in a war-torn place where you are being shelled. And the notion, as you've alluded to in our previous training, of trauma and what that can do to a person, and that people cling to leadership. And I think at the end of the day, people were looking for some kind of leadership from Ovechkin and all these veteran players, but at the same time, they don't always have the answers, and they're not going to be the answer that you're looking for in order to de-escalate this war.
Well, and you know, something that I'm always worried about, and that, like, I get fans have their desires and they want you to answer this and answer that, which, you know, who cares in the end? If you don't like them, you don't like them. But I'm always worried when media, so for example, I'll just take Kuznetsov. okay, over in Washington. So if you're going to him and you want to get his take on what's happening in Russia, I feel all you're doing is setting this up to fail. Because if he supports it, there's going to be a problem. If he doesn't support it, I think people forget they have family back in Russia. You got a country that is invading another country, whatever the reasons. And again, we're not getting into those details, but it's not so easy just to do something. So no matter what you say, you got to find a way to stay neutral, no matter how you feel or what you think. Patrick,
Well, people,
Well, I was kind of thinking. I think you're absolutely both absolutely right. You know, whatever answer a player gives to these questions, somebody's going to get mad at them about it. So they're you know trying to find a way to answer these questions while actually saying as little as possible. And that, I've all sympathy with them on that. Again, you say these are hockey players. They're not political scientists. They're not, you know, not certainly not geopolitical scientists. And as Ovechkin said, he's got friends in the U.S. and Canada, friends in Ukraine, friends in Russia. This is a very difficult situation for them as well. I mean, even without the media asking them about it, talking to them about it, it's a very, very difficult and worrying situation for them. And,
yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. Media's got the right and perhaps even a duty to ask these questions, to explore these stories. The players have their own rights and expectations and duties as well when it comes to answering them. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And,
I think we forget that players are humans, and as talented and as superior as they sometimes may appear, on the ice, they are just like you and I, where they are able to, they have feelings, they have emotions, they have things that they go through them. They're not robots for us to just do as we please with them. Yep. They have like that in the intensity. And when you go through an 82 game season for years, it takes a toll on you, it takes a toll on your body, and it's not just physically, it's mentally. You have to prepare mentally.
Yep.
And on top of that, you have to worry what's going on around you, not only within your locker room, but within your organization, especially if you're not succeeding and you're trying to build a winning culture. And if you're, what's going on in the world, because sometimes that can have effect. And I do want to mention, because I know it kind of came up, and maybe Patrick, you can make a little comment about it. There was some speculation last year when Tony Panarin had some issues with some allegations that came out of Russia after his criticism in the offseason of Vladimir Putin, and the fact that he had to go back and protect his family at the beginning, I believe, of this season or last season, to go and get them out, essentially, is what it was, right? Do you want to comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, it seems that somebody kind of set him up a little bit, that he made these criticisms, and somebody dropped a rumor or two, and say he took a leave of absence from the team and went home, went back, and was with his family for a bit. But yeah, I mean, it'd be dangerous to launch those kinds of criticisms publicly, and he did it, and made somebody very angry. And I'm sure that's in the minds of these players as they're dealing with these questions from the media as well. That there's a
it's so tough. I'm conflicted because because I come from the nation of Canada, so of course I'm always cheering for Canada as my top team nationally. But it's tough because actually my second favorite team is Russia. I absolutely love, and I love the Russian teams. I love what I've seen. I love seeing the change. So, we talked about years ago, the Canadians were the stoic people, right? The passionate, crazy people, and the Russians were stoic. Now the Russians are all charismatic and all over, and now we got Crosbys and McDavids who are very stoic, right? In their presence. And I like seeing the
Yeah.
mix, and I like seeing those fights, and I love the Canada Cups and the all the, and so now it's just like my heart's just broken. It's just like, oh man, I get why things have to be done, but right now it's a sad day in hockey, and it's really a sad day in the world. It
Yeah.
truly is. Did you figure out? Was there a junior team that had? What did we
Yeah,
find?
it's in fact he's been drafted by two because he's been taken in not only in the CHL import draft but also in the USHL
Oh,
import
okay.
draft.
So who do we got?
Well, the CHL, it's the Charlottetown Islanders in
Okay.
the Q, who hold his CHL rights, and I believe it said it was the Chicago Steel in the USHL. So
And that's interesting. I can't imagine him going if he did want to come over to Charlottetown, just being so far in the east. I could see him wanting a trade, just much like other players have done, even coming in to a more kind of a known team that's produced a lot of players. Because if he's going to come over, it's in hopes that he can land that number one spot and show himself for that full year, right? In Canadian hockey. Interesting. Wow.
I went back, just go back and check this out. I just thought of this now because I did it years ago. I went and tracked Russian picks in the or began to track Russian picks in the CHL import draft, and I remember almost nothing about what I discovered. I need to go back and find if I still got that data somewhere.
Well,
I went right back to the very beginning of the draft, or back to when they started drafting Russian
Well, if you
players.
find that material, bring it out because we're going to be coming into prospects coming up shortly. And one of our other good guests have been on the show, Mike Smith, has some great stuff. That's his name, right? Mike Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the goalie.
Are not Mike Smith, not the goalie, but he's got great stuff on drafts and how drafting is a lot of luck, and I think this would be a good one we could put together during a couple of weeks of prospects and stuff.
We had a lot of interest in that show when Mike Smith came on because everyone expected the goaltender to come on, and you could just tell people left as soon as they saw the real Mike Smith. Not because he wasn't as pretty, but because they just thought that he'd at least have a nice beard. And,
Well, hey, let's just say this, though. He has a Bobby Orr jersey, man. Mike Smith, you rule. Okay, well, why don't we jump over a little bit quickly? Let's tap in, Pavel, at just a few things that have been happening around the NHL. Our time, we've only got about another 5 to 8 minutes here, guys, to kind of tap in on a few things. We know a lot of you got to talk NHL at some point. So there's a few trades, rumors, that's always been happening. We're only a few weeks away. And also some new things. So do you want to just update us on Chicago maybe to get a quick start on the Blackhawks?
Sure.
What's happening?
Yeah, so finally they have made a decision that Kyle Davidson will be the new GM. And he had a big press conference, and he kind of talked about how there's going to be a rebuild in Chicago, which, as you guys can recall, 2 years ago, Jonathan Toews, when he was told, or when he kind of heard about that, there was some rumblings out of there. He was not very happy because he felt that core at the time, which was Duncan Keith, him, Patrick Kane, I think Brett Seabrook, who was still on injury, but potentially planning to come back. They wanted to still be competitive and maybe in the mix for a playoff spot to compete for the Stanley Cup. So it looks like they're maybe moving away from that legacy that they had in the 2010s and now moving on to something new. And of course, they have a lot of reparations to make given what has just recently in the last few months transpires with that organization. Will that include Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews retiring as Chicago Blackhawks, or will they be moved? That remains to be seen. They did go out and get some big fish, Seth Jones, whose contract doesn't start till next season. So that's going to be interesting how that plays out. And I know there's been some calls about some of the other players like Kubalik. People are really looking into him and a few others, some depth guys. So keep an eye out for Chicago to be sellers at the deadline.
So, hey, let's just take a minute and talk and add that piece in there because So we got both Kane. So we got Patrick Kane and Jonathan Tays. I mean, Kane has a lot left in him. I'm not sure on Tays. That's a little because of his injuries, right? They both have next year. So
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about some packages to bring in. This is a rebuild. So they have these two guys. Now, of course, these guys have to agree to go somewhere. I'm not sure. I wonder if Tays would just retire. I really do. Kane, I could see him getting one last, but wanting to go somewhere. But that's really interesting because you're not going to make more money than you're already making, and he's still worth that much money. And to be on a winner at the same time, that's really hard to find that, right? You have to take a chance. Plus, like you said, Kubalik. Now, I'm hearing people saying that he's not going to be worth the first round pick at the trade here, and yet he's got another year left. He's only 26. He's like 6'2", 6'3". He's about at 180, so he's light. But I mean, he had a great call there, and he's kind of struggled. But the team has struggled.
Yeah.
I don't tell me how you can't get a first round for that guy for Kubalik. I don't get that. And then why would you not trade Marc-Andre Fleury? I mean, I know he's got a limit on there. But I don't know. You got some take on what's happening in Chicago, Patrick?
Well, I keep hearing that Edmonton's interested in Fleury, but I don't know, whether he's on their list or
Yeah, I was
or
going
they're,
to say.
they're on his list or not. But I keep hearing they're interested. So.
So do you think he could even be on their list? Let's just be serious here. Do you think that?
Well, if I were his agent, I am not his agent.
Yeah.
But if I were, I would be saying to him something like, that's a team with some really, really good players that badly needs a goalie. And if they get a good goalie, they could go a very long way. So, I would be saying, yeah, sure,
Why not?
keep your options open vis-a-vis Edmonton, because that could be a very nice fit for him. If he's got one more playoff run left in him, and he seems to. I mean, he's playing really, really well this year.
You just won the flippin' Vezina last year, right? And the guy's
Yeah.
on a bad team getting a good save percentage still.
Yeah, and yeah, so say I don't know whether he'd consider Edmonton, but if I were his agent, I'd be very interested in that possibility.
I think
Well,
Patrick just made a lot of Oiler fans really excited again.
Well, I mean, there were some
rumors here as
rumblings
well.
that there were some rumblings that Washington, who we talked about earlier, was very aggressively wanting him, but because of the history between Washington and Pittsburgh and him being Pittsburgh's goalie for so long, he kind of declined. I think he's going to stay Chicago Blackhawk till the end of the season. One of the predictions I have is that Chicago, I think, is going to do a whole overhaul with their with their organization, including, I think, again, with the logo. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a new logo for the Chicago Blackhawks come next year or in the years to come, as well as they have to make some big decisions on top of the two big guys. Alex DeBrincat, who's up, and he is a previous 40-goal scorer, great winger. He can perform at any level. And, of course, are they going to keep him around the rebuild, or is he going to go somewhere else? Right?
He's got one more year left still, eh?
Oh, I thought it was.
Yeah,
he's done this year.
Yeah, I'm just on cap friendly. He's got one more year, but that makes good trade though, right? For a young player, he's only 24 years old.
Yep, for sure. Another thought occurs about Fleury and Chicago. I wonder if they don't go to him and say, look, you've won some cups. I mean, of course you want to win another, but you've won some cups. We love you here. We're trying to rebuild this organization, not just the on-ice team, but rebuild this organization.
Yeah.
What if we overpay you quite a lot and you hang around, and kind of be the face of the new Chicago Blackhawks, or if they want to change the name, be the new. Because trying to think, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about Marc-Andre Fleury. He's been I mean, people have criticized his goaltending from time to time, but nobody's ever said anything to suggest that he's a bad guy. Um, and
Wow.
um,
That would be a facelift, wouldn't it?
yep, get him
That,
in there as kind of the transition, to the
including
new.
behind the scenes, maybe into some management or development coaching or
Yep.
goalie coaching, like past whatever he can do, training the next guys ahead. Wow, that gives me I'll tell you, if you're passionate about hockey, that gives you the shivers when you think. Okay, I feel for the fans of Chicago. I know we're going to have to close off our other discussions. We don't have time, but I actually think that the fans of Chicago have been robbed because of so many bad things happening in management around the team, the way things have been handled. I actually agree with Pavel there, my colleague. I think, Pavel, you are right. I think that even the logo change, I could see them going to something like, keeping the name Blackhawks, but going to more of an actual real hawk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a black hawk.
Yeah, or a military tank or helicopter. I don't know. I know it sounds crazy for an original six, but it happens. And what better time to make the changes than when everyone looks at the things that have happened over these last years?
I
So,
think it was the last original six team to change its logo. Maybe or change its name. It's the Maple Leafs for sure. But um,
what were they before the Maple?
no,
Toronto Arenas.
Toronto Arenas and the Toronto St. Patrick's.
Yeah.
But I'm wrong because
The Maroon?
Detroit was the Falcons.
Oh, wow.
Their first season.
Dropping some fun facts on us, Patrick.
Woo!
Thanks a
Yeah.
lot, because Evan doesn't know any facts. He doesn't know anything about hockey.
I just want to
I've
remind.
got a feeling that fact was wrong. I've got a feeling it wasn't. Now this is Detroit Cougars. I knew it wasn't. I was
Wow.
thinking
Cougars,
Falcons
yes.
was wrong, but Detroit
Cougars.
Cougars. The reason they were the Detroit Cougars was because go back almost 100 years now, which is scary. Last non-NHL team to win the Stanley Cup was the Victoria Cougars in 1925 or so, 25 or 26. The Victoria Cougars, who played in the first in the Pacific Coast League and then in the Western League,
Yeah.
they became the Detroit Red Wings, more or less. Their players' contracts were bought up by whoever it was who was founding the Detroit team, and they were kind of imported en masse to Detroit. And so for their first season and maybe two, they were the Detroit Cougars after the Victoria Cougars, and then they did the Red Wings.
Well, I'm so excited, Patrick, that you came on tonight's show here because you filled in where my co-host should be filling in because he knows absolutely nothing about hockey as always. So I just want to mention, thanks guys for tonight. We're gonna, as we say all the time, we should be two guys in overtime because we always go overtime, not just hockey talk. It's been a lot of stuff we've been covering, but I just want to say thanks for following the show. Thanks to ASAP, All Sports, All Play Sports Network, for anyone catching us live here tonight or watching one of our older podcasts and stuff like that. We appreciate you guys. Follow us, like us, catch us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us. We also have some exciting kind of extra things going to be happening down the road that we'll continue to update you guys on. So any last thoughts, guys, that you want to give before we wrap up here?
True.
Well, I'd say profound hopes for a peaceful and quick resolution to this war in Ukraine, and good thoughts to the people who are affected by it and who are suffering and traumatized by it. And say it's much bigger than hockey. It's good to keep an eye on how it's affecting hockey. It's what we do. It's what we do. It's what we love, and but it's bigger than that. And so good thoughts and prayers and hopes for a quick end to this situation.
Amen. And I think I couldn't have said it better myself. All I want to add is just remember, guys, to like, follow, subscribe, share, follow us on Twitter. Patrick, where can they find you on Twitter?
I am at Chunklets Hockey.
Make sure you give Patrick a follow. He's got some great content. He also posts some amazing stuff on our Facebook site, so make sure you like and subscribe there. Evan, it's been a treat. Thank you again.
As always, it was a ring-a-ding-dong dandy today, folks.
Pleasure to be back on.
Absolutely, folks. So on behalf of Two Guys in Hockey Talk with our guest Patrick Conway tonight, I want to say in the meantime and in between time,
keep your sticks on the ice. Stay safe, everyone. We love you.
Cheers.
Good.